Hi, kitty cats. I got a comment on the Caster Semenya video that I did last week that sent me down this rabbit hole of thinking about identity and all the labels that we wear in our lives. And sometimes these labels come from society, sometimes they come from healthcare, sometimes we take those labels on ourselves. So today what I want to do is talk about what identity is. Do we even need this? And if we do, where do we get it? Then I want to talk about why Western society struggles so badly with identity. And believe it or not, I think AI actually plays into this a little bit. So, all right, some opening plugs here. So I am Dr. Amethysta Herrick. I'm an author and a podcaster, and I discuss identity and gender from a scientific standpoint, but also, I like to look at things from a more holistic standpoint than we tend to do today. So you can check the link below. It's right down there in the corner, down there, for more information about me and the work that I do. My website you can see is purplepawclan.com. You'd be able to follow me on all the social media networks you could possibly care about. I only have 3. As well as read all of my articles and view all of the podcasts that I do too. So if you like this content, I hope you'll consider subscribing. You can get a subscription for as low as $5 a month. See, not too bad. Also, if you write original content about identity or gender, something like that, something philosophical, something gender-based, I also publish articles and podcasts by other contributors. And if you're interested in contributing your work, your original work, please, email me through the contact page on the website, and I'd love to set it up. So, let me at least say hi to Margie. I see Margie is here. Hello. I also see Miranda is here, so hi to you as well. So let's see. Well, how did I even come up with this idea here? So it was interesting. I got, maybe you saw the Caster Semenya video that I did last week. Maybe you didn't. If you didn't, I wouldn't be surprised. It was like an hour-long lecture on like 5-alpha reductase type 2 deficiency, which, maybe that's fun, maybe that's not. It was fun to me, but I got a couple of comments on it, and there was one person in particular. I'm just going to use they. I don't know pronouns, I don't know name, but there was one person who kind of gave me sort of like this wry mansplaining sort of comment. We just came in with this blunt instrument. Nope, this person has such and such a structure. This person is a man. And so we had a few, choked myself. So we had a few back and forths, backs and forth. We exchanged a few messages. And at the end of it, the guy listened to the whole thing, which was very nice. I'm glad he did. But after he did, he left the comment. I got a cough. Hang on. He left the comment that I didn't answer the question of whether Semenya is a man or a woman. I went through a ton of science, right? Went through a bunch of philosophy, but that was the thing. This person had to get to a label. And it was kind of funny too, because at the end of it, it was like, again, here's a blunt force. No, this is a man. And I'm like, I literally just did an hour lecture on what we're looking at here, but that's fine. Anyway, got to this idea, this point where you really had to have a label. I wanted to know, is this a man? Is this a woman? And I think what I'm looking at here, this is like Western society really in a nutshell. And what I've been trying to, I guess, portray in the work that I've been doing now at this point, running on 3 years, so almost 3 years, is that having a label, putting something into a category, is not the same as science. And I think in Western society, we do that. We go, oh, well, we put a label on something, so it must be science. So Miranda, I see you can't stick around. Thank you for checking in. I don't know if you're still there, but hi. I also want to say, look, there's my wife, Ildiko. Hi. And Miss Chief, who says, hey, kitty cats. Always love that. Labels. Labels are human conventions. Labels don't have anything to do with nature. Labels come from humans. Ultimately, they come from humans because nature doesn't have a need to categorize everything. Doesn't have a need to categorize anything for that matter, because it is everything. That is nature. Nature has everything in it, and if you want to look at nature, you can go, oh, here we go. But humans, particularly in Western society, we don't seem to like that. If we can categorize somebody or something, if we can give somebody or something a label, this gives us a shortcut. Ultimately, it gives us this shortcut. And it's a shortcut so we can understand something quickly sometimes. Sometimes we can communicate very quickly. One of the thoughts that I had actually with my wife earlier were colors. If you hold something up, or if you say, go get me a glass, to put water in, and somebody says what color, you can say blue, and that very quickly, what's the word I'm looking for here? Pretty crazy. It very easily will take care of or get rid of a whole lot of different things, so different glasses in the cupboard there to put water in. So anyway, it gives us the ability to understand things quickly sometimes. If you look at it in physics, you can say, oh, this is like a regular elliptical orbit, something like that, going back to our Kepler stuff from last week. I don't know if you remember that. It enables us to communicate quickly. Give me a blue glass. But it also gives us the ability to discriminate very quickly as well. And I want to pop this up, Miss Chief, because now that you put this up. We use language for thought and use labels to reduce cognitive load. True, it does reduce cognitive load, and that's the part that I think is the problem. When we start using labels because what we want to do is discriminate, that we want to give somebody a label so that we can go, okay, I've given you a label, now I don't have to think about you any longer. It's a reduction of cognitive load, but it's not a reduction of cognitive load we want to do. That's where the label starts to be a problem. And I guess the big thing that I would come up with here is to say that all of the labels that get slapped on us, the labels that we take onto ourselves, the labels that we get from society, the labels we get from whomever, wherever, healthcare, we are not those labels. Although I understand many times we want to be. Sometimes we want to take on a label because it carries with it a sense of something that we want to portray that maybe we don't immediately do. So, but that's a major point that I want to make. Despite reducing cognitive load, which is a great point, Chiefy, don't misunderstand me. Despite reducing that cognitive load, we're still not the labels. Those labels do not define us. We are not our labels. I see Keeping On is here. Hi there. Good to see you, Keeping On. So what I want to talk about today. So this was the thing. So I had a back and forth with somebody about what I thought was science turned out really to be a label. So what I want to talk about today is, first of all, like, what is identity? What is human identity? Over the course of, between about 2020, it's like mostly over the course of 2023, so a couple of years ago now, I developed a theory of identity, a theory of human identity that also had linked with it a theory of gender. And so what I want to do today is talk about what is identity, in particular the way that I define identity, and then what is that link? Like, how is it that identity and gender go together? Is gender just something that can be a quick label, or is gender something that has to do with identity? I also want to talk about how we discover and develop identity. And maybe you go, gosh, discover? Do we really have to discover it? I think we do. And there are a lot of reasons for that, including just how we live in Western society, and that people want to continue to label us. I think a lot of times we go, oh, I'll just take this label, whatever this label may be, and run with it. And I think that's ultimately does ourselves a disservice and everybody around us. So how do we discover and develop identity? And then at that point, I I'm starting off with labels, and I think at that point we can return to labels and talk about how we should treat them, how we should consider the labels that somebody might want to put on you. So there we go. That's where we are now. Of course, as you know, as the way it's supposed to go in all of these live streams, it's live. So please send me comments if you have questions or if you want a clarification, or if you just want to talk, to give your input on what it is I'm saying. Please tell me, because I think, I would love to hear your input, and I would like for this to be somewhat of a discussion. So here we go. One more time, I'm going to put out there. If you're just joining me, my name is Amethyst Herrick. I am a scientist, and I also talk about identity and gender. What I'm going to talk about today is identity. So let me start going with this. When I ask the question, what is identity? I think it's important, first of all, to ask the question, what is not identity? If you don't have to walk very far to find conservative rhetoric that claims unequivocally that genetics is what's necessarily going to define sex, which is what is necessarily going to define gender, which is necessarily going to define sexuality. So you have this causal chain that goes from genetics to sex to gender to sexuality. This is a whole lot of identity that we're talking about here that comes from like one chromosome on one pair of the human genome. But the idea here is that identity, the way that they want to put it, identity ultimately comes from the genetics that you've got at conception. I think that's a dangerous concept. I'm going to tell you that right now, because conservative rhetoric actually goes on. I like this particular bit here. Conservative rhetoric tends to go on to say that everybody can lift themselves up by the bootstraps, right? Everybody can partake in the American dream. Everybody needs to make this voluntary choice to be the best that you can be. And then it's kind of funny because then they base much of this rhetoric, much of their politics is based on race and wealth, neither of which is necessarily voluntary. Race certainly not, and wealth oftentimes not. But I'm not going to tell you that conservative rhetoric has ever been consistent. So that's the conservative view of identity. Starts with genetics, right? But let's all be scientists, right? Let's jump into, let's put on lab coats, and what do we observe? We just look out into nature. What are we observing here? One thing I'm observing is that I have Thistle here. Hello, Thistle. Good to see you. So far, you've missed an introduction, right? So what do we observe? Let me actually look at this. Here is something from Margie, who says she has a recessive X-linked characteristic. So it's a tetrachromacy due to a bone marrow transplant. Oh, right. I almost kind of thought you had mentioned you're almost like a I'm forgetting the term for it now. I want to say chameleon, and that's not it. How is it I'm not coming up with it? Anyway, so there you go. Yeah, take that. Right there, it's interesting. Our bodies, when each cell is made, we do end up with a copy of our genome, or our genotype, excuse me. Each cell has a copy of our genotype, but boy, putting that together isn't very necessarily consistent. Chimera, thank you. I totally forgot blanked on the word. Chimera means that you have more than one genotype in your body. And this is actually more common than you might think. We don't always notice it unless it's something pretty striking, like, if you have an XX genotype in some cells of your body and an XY genotype in other cells of your body. It's a pretty crazy thing. So anyway, every cell in your body starts off with something that's even kind of an imperfect copy there. But as the cell gets older, things may break. We're always experiencing the environment, cosmic rays, as we used to call them. Maybe we still call them that. When I was a graduate student, I had to put things in like special boxes. I had a Faraday cage so that I could get rid of electric fields. I had some lead lines so that I could get rid of cosmic rays, so-called cosmic rays. This is how you do science. Anyway, that was off on a tangent there. Let's be scientists. If we look at nature, what is it that we observe? If we just look at the human experience, here's just me taking a step back and going, what's the human experience? Obviously, we each have a physical body. That one's pretty straightforward. Now we're already starting to get a little bit crazy, though, because each of us also has a mind. And there's a lot of debate. Is that mind in the body? Is that mind just neurochemistry? Is that mind something else? What could it be? Oh, Tina Purple Lover's here. Hi, Tina. Is the mind in the body? We don't really know. But if we were to go a little bit further down, we go, oh, cognition. The human experience obviously has emotions. It has thoughts. It has inspirations. It has a lot of things. And all of these are in our minds. But then we also have behavior. And behavior is voluntary to a point. But then the human experience also includes us, every human being, as an individual, also within a social environment. And the thing is that when you want to talk about identity, you cannot leave out any part of this. You can't get rid of the body and just say, well, we are just mind. We are just cognition. We experience our body, and we can't say that we don't experience our cognition. Oh my gosh, you got ads? Well, there you go. I can't always, I can't at all define when ads come in. Oopsie daisies. But we can't take any part of this out. We can't take the physical. We can't take the cognitive out. We can't take out the behavioral. We can't take out the social. If we're going to talk about identity, we always have to talk about the complete human experience. I mean, identity, it couldn't possibly just be genetics. In fact, actually, here's another quick aside. You know I love doing these, so I'm just going to do it. The crown. I'm not sure what crown we're talking about. So here we go. As a quick aside here. Identity can't be genetics. I'm going to play this from the conservative viewpoint here. Can't be just genetics. Because if so, that would imply the universe is deterministic. And I did something, I don't even know, within the last few weeks, the difference between deterministic and probabilistic. Right? Deterministic means we know the outcome, what the outcome is going to be. We may not be able to predict it easily, but we could, given we understood all of the inputs, we could predict the outcome. So if the universe is deterministic, then that means that humans must have no free will. And as Nietzsche put it, I think it was Nietzsche who said this, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but if we have no free will, it means there is no God. And usually conservative rhetoric also brings in a considerable component of Christian religion. So I think at this point, conservative rhetoric is self-defeating. There you go. That's my quick aside. Anyway, we can't leave any part of the human experience out of our definition of identity, because if we do, it just doesn't describe us. It doesn't describe the human experience. And identity must include that entire experience. So let's see. Oh my gosh. Wait, there are crowns? Oh, see, I'm seeing a different thing. Sorry, I'm reading a comment here. I guess there are crowns in the comments. Is that it? Because I'm not actually seeing them from here. I'm looking at something different. But I guess there are crowns based on audience participation. But as Margie says, it is very similar to Whose Line Is It Anyway, where the points don't matter. So thank you for explaining that, Margie. I had no idea what you were talking about. All right, so what is identity? Here's my theory of identity. This took me several, oh my gosh, I probably wrote 20 articles at least, thinking through my entire thought experiment to come to this. Identity. In one line, First of all, is a complex because all the parts are important. This is what I was saying. All the parts play different roles, and they play different roles at different times. That's why it's called a complex. You know, they interrelate, and depending upon where you are at one point will determine where you go afterward. So identity is a complex of the physical, the cognitive, the behavioral, and the social aspects of the human experience. And maybe you go, wow, that seems really broad. Yeah. Yes, the human experience is very broad. It's not the kind of thing that you just sort of, you just kind of toss off the drop of a hat. You go, well, identity, yeah, sure. It includes our body. It includes the way that we act, the way that we think, and it includes the way that we interact with each other. It has to, because if it doesn't, then what you end up with is something that doesn't describe the entire human experience. And I don't think it's worthwhile even considering that is identity. So my Thorns Have Roses is here. Hello, good to see you. Thistle brings up the point of free will, fate, destiny. The thing is, we could never know. Like Alan Shearer from Kingdoms of Amalur said. Oh gosh, I read some of that actually. You're right. See, the thing is, we could never know. And I guess, I think it makes much more sense to live your life based on what we do know. I think it was Maya Angelou. Yeah, Maya Angelou who said, always be the best that you know. So always do the best, behave the best according to what you know. And when you know better, do better. I think that's it. If we don't know, should we be making some of these, crazy categorizations? I would say no. So I see, Tina, Wade Wilson, Karma Chameleon, Karma Bee Chameleon. What's that bee? Kind of curious. What could the bee mean in that? So let's see. I also see Char. Hello, Char. Good to see you too. Oops. How do I get back to, is it this, I hope? Oh, good. Wasn't sure how to get back to comments. All right, so let me see. A close friend once told Thistle, strive to be whatever you want to be. Fate might be a lie, but if it isn't, then worrying about it won't change a thing. Your friend was Maya Angelou. That's pretty awesome. Did you used to go out for coffee or something and just, hey, let's write a poem together? What do you think? I don't know. All right, I want to talk about the link now. So I've defined identity. Defined identity is this complex now of the physical, the cognitive, the behavioral, and the social. But now I want to talk about that link between identity and gender. We all know very well that gender is a hotly contested topic these days. And I started this whole thing off by saying that what this person wanted me to do ultimately was throw out a label, a gender label. Wanted me to say, I think Caster Semenya is. That's what this comment was trying to get me to do. So there is a link between identity and gender. In fact, I think that they're exceptionally close, and I can go through some of this right now. There are, of course, two primary prevailing theories of gender that tend to, they try to have some sort of a debate, although we struggle with that. These two prevailing theories of gender, the first one that I put out there was that conservative rhetoric, that genetics is sex, is gender, is sexuality. This is the typical conservative rhetoric. The other one is that gender is a social construct. And I've talked a lot about what a social construct is, and social constructs imply that you have a social environment that gives a word meaning by using it. I know that's a lot of times we tend to think of social construct. At least critics of this particular theory have said, well, that just means it's whatever we want it to be. You can just say, well, I want to be this, and therefore it's done. which is not how a social construct works. It's not how social constructionism works. This is a philosophical movement that's gone back quite a while. But so if we look at these two theories, especially in the light of human experience, humans, it's possible for humans to make choices, to make voluntary choices that do not improve their chance of survival. In other words, it is possible for us to choose against our biology. A fun fact here, maybe it's not that fun, somewhat of a fun fact here. It turns out humans are not the only species that will choose against its best good. There are many species that will choose against their survival. Now, normally they do that for the sake of survival of a hive or something. Like you'll see this with ants. We see this with bees all the time. But we'll also see that we have also seen mammals, several mammals that will. I mean, dogs routinely will risk their lives, trying to get their masters. I suddenly became like 1800s Mississippi. So there are many species that will do this, that will actually reduce their chances of survival. So they make some sort of decision. This is a voluntary decision. And if you were to say that all of this could just be biology, biology does its best to stay alive. It always does its best to stay alive. That's what adaptation is the fight to stay alive. And so if humans, as well as other species, will make choices that do not improve the chance of survival, that means that identity cannot only be biology. Let me check it. There's a few things here. So Miss Chief has brought up altruism. Thistle has brought up eusocial species, which says what's good for the colony is not always good for the self. Yes. And ants and bees are very good at doing those types of things. So, you know what? I'm not going to show that. So Thistle left a comment here that says sex and gender are different things. And then, go ahead and you can read the rest of that. But so Angela here, before I go on to say more about this, Angela says, we identify ourselves, but as a trans person, people around us might identify us differently, which we can't control. Agreed. And Angela, I believe that's the social aspect of identity. I'm going to go into this a little much more depth. That hopefully doesn't make people go, oh, I better get out of here now. Oh gosh, I thought that was going to be it. I will, I gave the one sentence definition of identity from my own theory, but I got a lot more that I can go through on that. So let's see. So when we look at gender in light of the human experience, we can make choices that don't improve our chances of survival, which means it can't only be biology. But humans also have inspirations. Sometimes we have something that comes from inside one human, and that human changes behavior. And these inspirations and this behavior, if they go out to other people, that's what creates society. So we definitely do have cognitive and behavioral aspects of our experience that create society. And if we create society, you might say, well, isn't that the definition of a social construct? Not exactly like that. The social construct is something that gains meaning by widespread use. But society changes through individual inspiration, individual behavior. And yes, that ends up becoming widespread, or could become widespread. But think of all the people who are not celebrated until after they're gone. So, we can go on and on about this one, but the point is that gender can also not purely be social. It cannot purely be biology. It cannot purely be society. So, since we're all scientists, let's be scientists again. I mean, I've done other another live stream where I talked a little bit about this, but why don't we just observe what nature does? I mean, as we go through life, we experience all parts of our identity. Gender is clearly physical. Gender clearly has physical components. We have sex characteristics, whether they're primary, whether they're secondary. We have characteristics that give us the ability to reproduce. But that's not all. It's not just our bodies. Like, there's even like clothes, and clothes has a social component to it, or a social aspect to it. So there's clothes. There's there's the way that we style our hair, whether we use makeup, whatever. You could even look at just physical capability, right? We've liked to put this, some people have liked to put this as hunters versus gatherers, hunters and gatherers, right? The hunters were supposedly the men, the gatherers were supposedly the women. Once again, this is a social component that's now being based on physical capability. So gender is clearly physical, must have some physical aspect to it. Gender is clearly cognitive because we think in certain ways. There are people who will think in ways that display toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. I don't want to just throw it out there as only one. There are aspects of gender that there are gender roles that includes being emotional versus emotionless. So gender is clearly cognitive. It includes thoughts. It includes emotions. But gender is also clearly behavioral. And this is part of, so much of this is where Judith Butler ends up going to say that we perform certain aspects of a gender role. But I mean, we can keep going a little bit further. Like, we could look even at just vocal inflections. The way that we talk to each other, the way that some people will open doors for each other. You have the, behavior that is differential to the alpha male. Deferential, struggling on that. Behavior that becomes, that includes deference to the alpha male. There we go. Got through it. It's clearly behavioral. These are gender roles, and gender must clearly be social because I've already brought up the words gender roles. These are roles that happen in a social environment, and we can see this because we can go to different countries and see that the gender roles are different. So it must be dependent somewhat on the social environment, and you could even throw out there that there's fashion, right? If you were to look at fashion, which is a social thing, that applies across several of the axes. Clothes, which is physical, slang, which could be cognitive and behavioral. The beliefs that we have, that's obviously cognitive. So gender spans the physical, spans the cognitive, spans the behavioral, spans the social. Now, maybe you're going to say, well, look at you. You just redefined what Simone de Beauvoir called derived characteristics. No, that's not what I mean. Because derived characteristics tend again to imply a society. And humans have identity, whether or not they're in a social environment. I made a point once that there's no need for gender when you're on a desert island because you have no need to show somebody your identity. It's just you. When you get into a social, and that's gender, because this is you trying to show something to somebody else to give them shortcuts on who you are. But humans have identity with or without a social environment because humans have identity as one of our defining characteristics. It's part of what makes us human. It is what makes us human. I've read people, I guess I haven't heard them, but I've read people who say, well, something like a dog. A dog doesn't have identity, right? A dog doesn't have enough cognition to have identity. And yet a dog can certainly tell the difference between itself and like a human that it's trying to save. So, identity is a defining characteristic of humanity certainly in the way that we express it. Certainly in the way that we express it, that we do have such a rich social and cognitive and emotional range of everything. And that's partly what does distinguish us from other animals on the planet. So, all right, let me see, what else do we have here? How did I drop down to third place? Yeah, isn't that a bummer? So let's see. So Thistle now brings up a scientist might be a bit of a stretch in her case. Well, that's all right. A mad genius is just as good. That's fine. Margie says she was a mad genius. Just was. Psychotherapy mellowed her down. Now just a mildly disgruntled genius. I think that's cool. Mildly disgruntled. I think, if all of us could downgrade our genius just to mildly disgruntled, I think that would be a good goal to go for. Miss Chief makes a good point here. Says dogs only think in imagery. They don't have language to think with. I don't know if we could say that. I know that I've read this. Again, this is not something that I saw or like actually spoke with somebody about. But I've read that the dolphins and I think it was orcas in particular have what appears to be a form of language. And I guess I don't know. I mean, does like a cat have that? Does a dog have that? Maybe. I'm not sure. At this point, really, I think all we could say is we certainly can't understand their language. Although it's really obvious when my cat's like, going around me right in the, in the morning, I get up, she's meowing and meowing and meowing. And I know very well that she doesn't give a crap about me. She's just like, hey, there were treats over there. And I haven't had one all night. I'm going to need you to come over here and give me a treat, maybe two, maybe a whole handful. And I go, oh, poor kitty. So let's see, what else do we have here? So Joe Neal says that he just heard about TERFs. Just heard, wow. So the trans-exclusive radical feminist. I'm trying to figure out if I want to say anything or don't. I think I don't. It is, you said craziness. It is a fascinating thing. I would say that if you have somebody who's supposed to be the pinnacle of privilege, the absolute pinnacle of privilege, and that person will willingly give up that privilege in order to express femininity, I think that should be somebody you really want to check into. Not exclude them, but rather go, why would somebody want to come to the point where feminism would do them good? I mean, it's a fascinating point. I don't know what else I want to say about that, but I think I'll leave it at that. So like Angela says, as a trans woman, my actions are female, but because of my past, my gender behavior can sometimes be masculine by reflex. Yeah, right. I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, I think much of the way that I behave now is feminine. Certainly when I get angry, and I do. Sometimes when I get angry, my behavior becomes more masculine. But I kind of want to challenge the idea that behavior is by nature masculine or feminine. And there's a lot that we could talk about there. But I mean, like, is it by nature that femininity, that it's feminine to be emotional? Is it by nature that it is masculine to be emotionless? I don't think so. Those are, again, labels that I think we've put on. It's labels that we've put on those behaviors. And admittedly, those are social norms, admittedly. So I'm not saying you're 100% wrong. I'm saying, I think it's difficult to label these things. And ultimately, I think we want to question, do we want to label them? So Margie brings up there are dogs who have learned to distrust men. They trust medically transitioned trans women because we don't smell masculine. That brings up an interesting point that I wondered what would happen with my cat when I transitioned gender. And it didn't seem like anything, like she noticed anything. Like it was just like the same thing. Now just I have more pillows, to lie on. But otherwise, I don't think she noticed. I think that's fascinating though. The idea that there's obviously there are smells associated with sex pheromones, right? Sex pheromones, and there are definitely animals and humans that respond to them. So let's see. Thistle is saying, yeah, they do. They even have names for themselves and each other. I think you're probably talking about maybe the dolphins and stuff. I think they do. Yeah, I mean you've got like Flipper and Jim and whatever. Oh, Mischief brings up that bees have language too. I read something about that yeah, they do that with like a little dance. It's kind of an interesting little dance that they'll do in these. I'm doing this like because there was a clockwise versus counterclockwise little dance thing that they'll do. That'll say, I found food. I don't know if those were the only two dances, but I found food. There's danger. That is fascinating, and that ends up becoming something that the whole hive starts to do, and then things change. It's pretty. I think that's pretty cool. There are so many examples that we have of a modicum of language, because birds will do this a lot. If you have somebody who walks into like a forest, birds have like a danger call that will be echoed by other birds. Maybe they're not even hanging out, but have danger calls, and then they have like an all clear type call. It's pretty interesting. So Joe asks, was that a touchy subject? Not touchy to me, but TERFs is certainly something that a lot of people want to talk about. So Miss Chief says it sounds for communication and not a language. So Miss Chief is also saying they don't have the necessary brain parts. I don't know that I would wholly disagree. What I'm going to say is that the purpose of a language is communication. But does communication have to be with an alphabet? Does it have to be with sounds? Could it be just visual? Because, I mean, that's what our ancestors did, long ago. They had drawings and stuff. So I don't know. The distinction between communication and communication with a dedicated language, to me, is a fine one, because both require a conceptual understanding first. So you have to have a concept of, say, with bees, danger, a concept of food, let's go and forage. And those concepts, I think, are what end up defining language, because they're shared. It's a shared concept among everybody in the hive there. So, okay, let me see. So Joe asks, why would exclusion be a virtue? If I'm going to explain it as I know it, about TERFs. So Joe is asking, is why would excluding transgender women necessarily be a virtue? If I'm going to explain it as I know it, and that doesn't mean that I know everything here, you are typically talking about women who have been harmed by men, I think, or at least know somebody who has been harmed by men, have seen the atrocities that have been committed by men against women, and there's a lot of that. It goes on and on and on. And as far as I'm concerned, that's absolutely appropriate, because I think men have done a lot of bad things to women. Does that mean that you want to exclude somebody who gives up her masculinity? I don't think so, but I could understand how somebody might say, well, it's a virtue because, we're getting rid of somebody who used to be a man who may have harmed us, and so it's difficult. So I think that's difficult. So Angela says society doesn't give it that kind of label, and forgive me, Angela, I think I lost the context. I think we were talking about gender there, so. All right, so Miss Chief says, yep, gender's based on a lot of stereotypes as well as biology. Yeah, stereotypes, though, are social. And general, my point. We get conditioned to fit within the stereotypes. Agreed, and I'm going to get there. So yes, stereotypes, though, are purely social. You don't have a stereotype unless you have a group of people whom you can stereotype. Let me rephrase that. A group of people whom another group of people stereotypes. There. That was a bit more cagey than I thought it was going to be. Joe says cats can be very dismissive. Ain't that the truth? Jeez. Feed her and everything. I mean, occasionally. All right, so Margie brings up the point. These people, TERFs, are under the misapprehension that respect is a zero-sum game. That respecting someone necessarily means distrusting another. This is nonsense, obviously. I'm curious. Yeah, I mean, is it just that it's a zero-sum game? Yeah, again, maybe I don't want to jump into that right now, but here we go. I think we're all asking that. Bees, the hyenas, the lower primates, the higher primates, the the bakers, the shakers, the quakers, we're all asking, what's in the Epstein files? Don't ask. All right, so let's see. So Joe says, Margie, I guess it's something like that. I hate to think TERFs are mostly angry lesbians, to put it indelicately. I mean, it's indelicate, but I would characterize a lesbian. And now here I am going off on more definitions, but I would characterize a lesbian as somebody attracted to femininity, not body parts. And so, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to move on. So Miss Chief says language is for communication. Language is for communication. Yeah. Yes. But importantly, it's for thought so we can use logic. Well, that's concepts. See, that's where I'm going with that, is to say those are concepts. The concepts is what we need for thought. The concepts are what we need to do some sort of logic, but we don't have to have words for those things. If we have the concept, I think we're capable of doing something with it. So, let's see. Oh, Thistle brings up its prejudice. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thistle says one AMAB did bad once, so all must be just as bad. Joe's just going to show that one as long as I showed the last one. We do know what's in there, and I think that's yeah, there you go. Okay. Thistle also brings up the point that lesbians are the most inclusive people for trans femmes. It's been the bisexual people that I've known. Pardon me. It's been the bisexual people I've known who are like, oh man, you're transitioning gender? Cool, let's do it, And then we're totally fine with me before and after, and it's really the bisexual people that I've noticed. Pansexual is, the word I like to use now. So, all right, before I take a break here, because I'm coming up on the hour here, so I wanted to, my two big points here. Humans have and need identity, whether or not they're in a social environment. So let's talk about identity and gender. These are my theories here. So I'm not, if you go, oh, where'd you get that? This is based on my own observation of nature that I just described. So here you go. So if you hate it, you can only blame me. Where does identity come from? When we are born, we start off with a set of beliefs, a set of knowledge. And these are things that we know are true, that we know that they're right, but we really don't know why. And I'm almost kind of hedging that. The thing is that there are things that we know, there are things that we believe, there are things that are right and true, and we don't know why that is. And for the most part, we don't even question them. And we don't question them because we don't really need to. As you get along in a society, each of us has a set of beliefs, and unless you clash with somebody, you're not even gonna question what it is you believe. When you do get into, one of those clashes, though, of course, you end up walking away going, how could that person believe that one thing? How weird that there's somebody who does not believe what I believe. There you go. This set of beliefs, this set of knowledge, I will even call it, is the origin of identity. This is my name for it, the origin of identity. This is what I would call, if you were looking for it, the born this way component. This is the born this way component. We're born and we just have this set of knowledge and beliefs. Where does it come from? I don't know. I had a conversation with somebody who said, oh, well, here's the thing. It's all biochemistry. And I said, oh, so like just the chemistry in the brain, so like neurochemistry. And she goes, oh, yeah. And I said, that, so we don't really know, is what you're saying. Like, we don't know how thoughts are stored. We don't know how thoughts occur. So we don't really know. And she goes, well, you've got like a soul. Well, that's pretty ridiculous. And I said, yeah, but, is that much different from not knowing and calling it biochemistry versus not knowing and calling it a soul? And I think the quick answer is no. This is our born this way component. We don't choose these beliefs. We don't choose this knowledge. We just know it. We just know it. And we might be able to explain some of it. Might. Okay, I don't want to go out on a limb here. We might be able to explain some of it, but at some point, if we're explaining, we're going to get down to this point where we go, just because. Just because. I like broccoli. That's it. I like purple. I like broccoli just because. I don't want this to be taken as a perversion of science, nor do I want it to be taken as somewhat of the prevailing idea of what a social construct is. This is not social construct. This is not a perversion of science. It doesn't mean just because we can say, I want it, that it's always going to work. The science is going to go along with our beliefs, that the science is going to go along with, that the universe is going to go along with our beliefs or our knowledge. But that's because every single one of us, when we're born with our origin of identity, is an individual as part of a very large universe. And yes, we have this set of knowledge. Yes, we have this origin of identity, but we still have to obey at least some of the physical laws in the universe. So that's one thing. As humans, we are individuals, and we have to figure out we are distinct from a universe and yet still part of it. So we have to look at ourselves in a holistic way. That yes, we are separate, and yet we cannot escape our universe. But the human experience is also very, very social. Very, very social. When we're born, we take years to develop to a point where we can live on our own. Like, you can't take a 3-year-old and just go, we're going to put you in the forest. Can you build a shelter, get a fire, feed yourself, just forage something. Shouldn't be hard. There are deer walking by. You should be able to make a bow and arrow. You can't do that. Humans take years to develop to the point where we can live on our own. Each of us depends on others. And all of those others end up making impressions on us. Now, there's something that I've talked about, usually when I'm talking about hypnosis, because our mind goes through changes as when we're born. Our mind is different from when we're about 7 to 10 years old. When we're young, despite us having this origin of identity, we don't have a lot of control over our lives. We may not even have a lot of control over our bodies. We learn things from everybody around us. And we may, deep down, disagree with them, but we understand that that's the way things are. We disagree with them, but we can't express that we disagree with them, because if that's what we've experienced, we assume that's the way the universe is. So by about 7 to 10 years old, our mind actually splits into 2 big parts here. The conscious mind and then the subconscious mind. Now, when we're young, along with having this origin of identity that includes a whole ton of knowledge and beliefs on what we know is true and right, we also get these patterns. We get these patterns that we also know is true and right. And so the two can be in opposition to each other. And we set up this cognitive dissonance, possibly, once we start to develop this conscious mind that can do the evaluation. We set up this cognitive dissonance that we have to find some way to rectify, but we can't. Because we have one thing that we know is true and right and another thing that is true and right. And we can't change either of those two, at least not easily. This is where hypnosis comes in. If I were to make a brief plug, and if you want to talk more about hypnosis, hit me up. HMU, as they say. So here we are as individuals in the universe in a holistic way. And yet, what we know as true and right must be expressed within a social environment. And so once again, we have to think a little less holistically, but still somewhat holistically, that we are not individuals who are untouched by everything that's going on around us. And that includes other people's cognition, other people's behavior, other people's identity and gender. That's our parents, our parents in our family. These are different social environments. We have a social environment at home. We have a different one at school, maybe a different one at work. Social media, people are different on social media, all kinds of things. So our origin of identity, here we go. I'm finally getting back to it. Our origin of identity must learn to survive within that social environment. I have said that this is a negotiation for safety. We have this idea of what is true and right, and we only express what we can. We try to perform what we've learned, and maybe it goes counter to who we are, and so we struggle to do that. And then we do not express what we've learned not to let out. And I'm saying that, as a transgender woman, that there was a whole lot I learned not to let out. But this is our identity. We have a set of knowledge we know is true and right. But when we express that in our social environment, we have to negotiate for our own safety. And that's where identity comes from. And so if you ask the question, there's been this age-long question, well, is it nature or is it nurture? Well, it's both. Has to be both. Because we know who we are, because that's in our origin of identity, but we also know only what we can get away with. And that's in the social environment around us. I'm going to talk a little bit more about gender, I swear, but identity and gender, ultimately, when I've been talking about all of this, identity and gender, I think are linked. They're maybe even the same thing. I've thought about that. Originally, I was saying that gender was a sub-classification of identity. And the longer I think about it, the more I think, I don't know if there are aspects of identity that don't span some kind of social gender role. So I think identity and gender are the same thing. Ultimately, you have gender that spans all of the aspects that I mentioned: the physical, your clothes and everything, your presentation, your primary and secondary sex characteristics, if you want to go that far, your cognition, your behavior, and then how much you can express within a social environment. There's a point that came to mind here, but I'm close to taking a break. So let me check out comments here. So let's see. So Joe makes the point, I think a lot of cis male heterosexuals who are actually intelligent, I like that's been emphasized, actually intelligent, are very inclusive and strong allies. I fall into that group. I'm with you. I think that, if you are strong in yourself, you're not going to care what somebody else does. And there's more I have later on, but I think that's an important point. If you are strong in yourself, you're fine with other people mostly. And I have more to say about that, Joe, but thank you. That's an excellent comment. I truly So let's see. Margie says, long before my egg cracked, I had a friend who came out as lesbian. She later told me I was the only person she knew with whom the relationship was the same before as after. Respect counts. Yeah, isn't that true? Joe says, I think there is a segment of center-left males that are still hung up on gender and sexuality, but true leftists are in step with science in liberal Western thinking. Yeah, I mean, I wish I understood what in step with science meant. Because I don't, I was talking to my wife. There was a picture. I'd love to find this thing. I got to find it somewhere. But it was a guy who's holding up this big sign, okay? This is an older guy, okay? And it says, there are only two genders, male and female. And then in quotation marks, trust the science. And I was like, there is so much to glean from this. Here's a guy using sex terms to denote gender. And then he's got a quote. It was an actual quote. Somebody was quoted there. Trust the science? Who was that? Was that person an expert? Who even knows? But this guy's all beaming. Right, here we are. I'm showing it to you. I'm owning the libs or whatever it is they say these days, right? Trust the science. What is his science? Anyway, hard to say there. Let me see. What else do we have here? Miss Chief says I'm excellent at hypnosis. Thank you. Well, we haven't done anything for a while. I hope. So Margie also brings up demisexuality. So she mentions she's demisexual, and I'm glad that you. Oh, CM Burns is here. Hello. I'm glad you brought that up. Demisexual is on the asexual spectrum. That's interesting. I didn't think they would think of it as asexual. Demisexuality is, as I've heard it, and also the way Margie's explaining it, is require an emotional connection to the person before you can actually have like some sort of carnal interest. So there you go. Let me see. Oh my gosh, there's a bunch of comments here. Sorry, I got behind. So yeah, Margie brings up there's a ton of vocabulary and concepts to learn here. So let me see. Oh gosh, Joe, I want to ask a question. When you say, Joe, are you Margie, are you anatomically female? At what point in life? Because I mean, I had a vaginoplasty done. Am I anatomically female? Does anatomically female imply ovaries, fallopian tubes, and a uterus? Is somebody who had a full hysterectomy no longer anatomically female? There's a lot that I did a whole live stream on what biological sex could conceivably mean, and I don't think it means much of anything. So, all right, let me see. Oh, this is interesting. So Joe brings up something from the East, and I guess did I miss something? I don't even know what I missed there. Probably something, but so here we go. Yeah, Joe says, yeah, an old guy referring to old science. Yeah, maybe. But see, the thing is, I'm not even sure that's true, Joe. You know, there's a whole bit that I've done on the definitions both of sex and gender before we had any knowledge of genetics, before we had any knowledge of heredity, and heritable characteristics, before we knew a lot of the things, before we could even spell the word DNA. Okay, maybe not, but before we ever had the word deoxyribonucleic acid, we had these concepts of sex and gender. So I don't know. Is that old science? I mean, I think that's still the valid science. Trying to shoehorn in some of these other things that should end up just sort of muddying the waters doesn't really help a lot. So, all right. Let me see. All right, I am going to take a quick break. Ooh, I'm a little bit over. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to put up 5 minutes on the clock. But really what that means is I'm going to go pee. Thank you. I'm going to refill my water bottle or something. But I'm going to be right back. Stick around. I have more to talk about in terms of discovering and developing identity. And this was sort of the fun of the fun part that I was expecting. Although we've had some really good conversations. So please stick around. Less than 5 minutes. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Back early, because why not? All right. So first of all, so I see. Thank you, Joe, for clarifying what that was. Third sex. I have a point to make on that. Before I do, though, I am Amethyst Herrick. I am talking about identity and gender here on the Identify Yourself live stream. If you have thoughts or questions about identity or gender, I hope you'll drop them in the comments right there. And we're having a good time. All right, third sex. Probably more accurate to call that third gender. I assume you're talking things like, you know, I would actually include like Two-Spirit in Native American culture, Katai in Thai culture, Hijra in Indian culture. Those are more accurately probably described as genders, third genders. I'm going to put a pin in this. All right, I'm swear I'm going to put a pin in that because I want to remember it. I'm going to return to it when we talk about labels again, if that. So I have J.A. Vames. J.A. Vames. I am here. Hi. Good to see you. Thank you. So let's see. We have, oh, Joe, thank you so much. It says, Joe says he's 100% in agreement with my viewpoints and empirically based thinking. I don't know if you always want to be on my side. Believe me, there are a lot of people who, all right. There's a lot of personal stuff Margie's talking about here. I kind of want to move on a little bit here. Margie, I would take some what's the word I'm looking for? Take some umbrage? Sure. I would disagree with that you were a biological female. I mean, I don't think a biological female has a lot of meaning to it. Also, I mean, if you're going to use a term of sex, then that implies that you'd reproduced in a particular way. So anyway, let me move on here. So J.A. Vames, hello. So let's see. Transgender, white male chauvinist. Yeah, I know. Well, that's kind of the thing. All right. Here we go. I want to talk about, this is C.M. Burns. J.A. Vames is also C.M. Burns. It's kind of funny that you've come over here. I don't know if it stopped streaming on the other platform, but I definitely noticed that it's pretty dead over there. So maybe it's better to do it over here. All right. Let's see. I had talked at the very beginning, the idea of discovering and developing identity. The major thing here, oh, hey, look, Freibird's here. Hello, Freibird. The main thing that I wanted to talk about in some of this, like, how do we find out what's in our origin of identity? I said this is a set of beliefs, a set of knowledge that that we know we have. You know, it's beliefs, it's knowledge. We know it's all right and true, but how do we find what's in it? Because you still have to. We have to look inside. In short, we have to look inside. J.A. Vames, this is interesting. I'm still on break somewhere else. There you go. All right. We have to look inside. That's difficult. Ultimately, it's kind of difficult. Because what that means is that we have to shut out our social influences. Shutting out those social influences is what's so difficult, because only we have the ability to hear what our origin has to say. There is nobody in society, there is no psychotherapist, there is no mental health person, there is no hypnotist, there is no nothing that can tell you what's in your origin of identity, because only you can hear what's in it. And as a result, that means we must both discover what's in it and develop it. If we listen to it, if we listen to if we think about our experiences over the course of our life, and we listen to what the origin of identity has to say about it, to a certain extent, this is discovery. Maybe we think to ourselves, oh gosh, who would have thought? I didn't realize those things. But we also choose to express what we can. So I mentioned this is negotiation for safety within our social environment. We choose to express what we can. And this is also development. I mean, if you go, gee, I wish, I wish I knew something more about music or something, because your origin says, oh, you ought to check out, music. This is development. And the thing is, we haven't experienced everything in life. I mean, presumably, if you're here now, hopefully, you haven't experienced all of life. As we go through life, we're always discovering what we know about our experiences. And we're also continually revising them. As we're revising our experiences and how those experiences change what we choose and how we choose to express. I don't think of this as cyclic. I think of it like this. I think of it as, if you have an oyster, the oyster gets a grain of sand in there, okay? That grain of sand accretes. Accretion is the word for this. So there's schmutz that accretes. I think there's a more technical word, but schmutz is what I got now. Not an expert on oysters. I'm going to just run with me on this. The schmutz that goes around the grain of sand and turns it into a pearl. And this is the way I think of our identity. First of all, because it's important to think of every single one of us as a pearl. I think every single one of us is valuable. Frybird-nosed oysters, that's... I'm glad to know. Okay, what is it? It's not schmutz. What is it? Well, thank you. There's people saying really nice things about me. Soothed by my voice. Yikes. If it's not schmutz, what? Oh, it's goo. Oh, okay, goo. Sorry. So not schmutz, but goo. Got it. Schmutz. But I think of it like that. You have a grain of sand, and that grain of sand is like your origin of identity. And as you go through life, you accrete this experience around it. And that experience, that means your origin of identity. And every time a new experience comes in, it has to deal with this experience that you've got. And then your origin of identity is some of the the knowledge and beliefs at the very bottom. So anyway, not exactly cyclic. It's not cyclic that we learn something and then we express something else. Learn something, express something else. We experience something that becomes added to everything that we've got. So there we go. I think of it as a pearl. So what are ways? Actually, let me plow through some of these before I talk about anything else. Let me see. I don't care if anybody was late. There's no late or early here. All right. So Frybird says she doesn't know the name for the slime either. I'm gonna just run with schmutz. Oh wait, you're offended by schmutz. Oh, I'll take schmutz back then. It's not schmutz. Okay. Hey, quit taking CM Burns' toy. I'm not sure what's going on over there. All right, let me see. So let's see. So I have a really exceptional point here by Joe that says, as an ally, labels are only important to me because I know terminology matters when creating legislation. Yeah, we're going to get to that, I promise. Oh, I see I didn't link it, but I'm going to get there. And that's because that's a really, really great point. It's a really, really great point. If you want to learn who you are, if you want to discover and you want to develop this, what are the ways that you listen and then hear what's going on in your origin of identity? There's really only one way: to spend time alone. This scares the crap out of people, I know it. But you spend time alone. You could read a book. That's something. As you read a book, you're learning through somebody else's experience. It's really fascinating how much we can learn from hearing somebody else's story. I read a statistic once, or just some study that said that people who read fiction tend to be more empathic. They tend to be able to understand more experiences than people who don't. And that's regardless of intelligence. That's, because I had a whole ton of reading that I did in college and graduate school, but that didn't do anything to improve my empathy. So anyway, a fascinating thing there. You can read books. You can just sit and think. I did that this morning. I was really sort of surprised. I didn't completely expect to, but because oftentimes I wake up and then I'll pick up my phone immediately. So what happened on social media? Because it's really important, obviously, that right when I wake up. But I just sort of sat there and I looked up at the ceiling, looking up at the ceiling, and I just went, what's going on in my head? And then at some point I looked up and I went, oh, it's been like 20 minutes, which I think is important. I mean, I'm seeing things. Yeah, it's tough to sit and think. Well, why are you saying it's only because he sits? Uh-oh. I like to meditate. I think that if you learn how to meditate, it's a good way to learn how to silence some of what's going on in your head. And that gives you the ability to hear the whispers of your thoughts. That being said, I don't think meditation is strictly the only way that you can do this. I also, I do have it right here. Look at that. I also, it's going to take me a second to pick it up. I write in a journal, and I don't even know why I had to like pick this up and show you. The thing is that I write in a journal, and that is an exceptional way to hear what you're thinking. And I know that sounds like maybe that sounds weird, but writing to yourself, especially when you know nobody else is going to read it, writing to yourself is a great way to hear yourself. It sounds circular, and it isn't. There have been times, no joke, that I'm like, oh, I wonder what happened today. And so I'll write down what started happening today, and then I will put my own interpretation on it that I don't think I actually would have considered if I hadn't written it down. I also recommend, this is something I recommend, I'm going to pull something out of my pocket too. I have pockets in my skirt. There's two other things that I personally would recommend. The other one is holding a journal. Yes, this is the exact same look as almost the exact same look as my journal. Yes, carries a pen and stuff. But I carry a notebook with me so that if I have a good idea, any idea, I like to write it down because I think that's important. I also got this little thingy-majobber. This is a thingy-majobber and not schmutz. Oh, geez, the knot's not working on it. But anyway, here's the thing. I might talk about this on Tuesday. I'm a little unsure. I don't want to do a product review type thing, is the thing. But this is a little thing that if I push a button, I can record something. And then when it stops recording, it actually uploads it to the internet and, throws out, it transcribes it and does some magical stuff with it. Another point that I'm going to make on that because of what I've learned from this thing. But so that's kind of cool too. Have a notebook, record your thoughts. There you go. But basically the point is you want to be able to disconnect this conscious mind that's always thinking about what's going on right now, and let that subconscious mind suggest other things to you. We use the conscious mind, and this is something else that I talk about in hypnosis type stuff. We use the conscious mind. It's a guard. It guards our subconscious so that we don't change what we know is true and right. It's a defense mechanism. Sometimes what we know is true and right is not at all true and right. We know it is as such, but these are our patterns, and we want those things to be able to bubble up. You have to allow that consciousness to recede. So, all right, I got a bunch more that I was going to bring up, but I see I forgot to link it like a dork. Modern problems. There we go. So let's see, what else do we have here? Thank you so much for calling me wonderful. I'm not gonna. I'm seeing from here. Fry is not touching you. CM. There you go. Let's see. You have to have a brain to learn. Fry is being mean. Come on. What's going on there? Let's see. Why is Fry a mod? That is, I know it is a little bit spooky, but yes, skirt pockets. My skirt has pockets. The very first skirt I bought, this actually is, for what it's worth. This is the first skirt I bought when I started transition. And it had pockets on it. I was like, well, that's crazy. I never had pockets in a skirt. All right, let me go through a few of these. Let me see. Other protesters, the Schwartz. Yes, you can't have a live stream without a Mel Brooks reference, right? And there you go. Margie is a mother of pearl, aren't you though? Margarita. I know that has to do with pearls right there. I don't know if that's what you were referring to, but yeah, that's the I get it. I actually wrote a song having to do with pearl in it. I'm just gonna throw that out there with pearl in there. That's the end of my story, I think. Let's see. Angela says, oh, well, first of all, Angela says, I know that since my partner died, I project more. First of all, I'm sorry that happened. That's a bummer. Projecting, I think, is if we're talking about projecting your desires or projecting your beliefs on somebody else, um, at least you're letting yourself feel those emotions. And I think that's probably good. I think that's probably good. Maybe, oh no, here we go. Hold on. So Thistle also says it's the same stuff they make shells out of. The pearls are the same stuff, you guys. So it's pretty easy. Anyway, so Angela says she analyzes herself and know her personality is more vibrant since your partner died. Oh, okay. Did you only transition after your partner died? I think actually I'm remembering this. I think so. Erica, first of all, hi, Erica, good to see you. Erica says she's never gotten into journaling. It's the kind of thing that when I started it, it's like I worry about impressing people. And there's a book, I'm going to forget who it is. I'm looking at it, but I can't read it from here. I will see if I can find it. But there's a book called The New Diary. That's it. The New Diary, and I'm trying to remember the name of the author. She was a contemporary of Anne Nin. It's not coming to me, but the point is that when you write in a journal, it shouldn't be to impress anybody, and I think that's how you get past it. Like I've misspelled things, and I've gone. I had to stop myself from like deleting it, and I think it's harder. I think it makes sense to write with a pen as well. It has to be with a pen because I think that unlocks more and more and more. Let me see. So Margie says the stuff that makes pearls and shells is called mother of pearl. Oh, well, okay. I mean, Margarita, I believe, also means it's something with pearl in it. I know that much. So, oh, okay. Angela says no, she transitioned before she met him. Okay. I'm not sure what's going on the other side here. But there's a bunch of Fry and CM Burns are having a moment. But you can Frybird does ask the important question: should you use a pen as opposed to one's own blood? So the pen. So I'm using a fountain pen. I'm using a fountain pen here. This is my Lamy 2000 that I think I've used for about 15 years, for what it's worth. And if you wanted to fill this, okay, because you have to fill it with ink. If you wanted to fill this with something other than ink, gimme. CM Burns says, I love this thing. So, I mean, this. If this breaks, I'm going to be really upset, I think. But, okay, here we go. Developing identity. I think we have these modern problems. I don't know if anybody remembers that movie. There was a Chevy Chase movie. I don't know, early 80s, mid 80s, who even knows, called Modern Problems. And the point was he was driving behind like a nuclear waste truck or something. Like it just, is always splashing out. But he has a sunroof open because he's all old and whatever, or all rich and mature and all. And he gets toxic waste on him, like nuclear waste on him. And then suddenly he's able to do things with telekinetically. And I always thought that would be the coolest. I need to go to like a nuclear waste dump. Anyway, I never did. Still can't do anything telekinetically. I don't know why I had to tell that story either. Here we go. I said at the beginning of this, now I'm finally getting back to labels. So Joe, we're going to get back to your point with labels and then the third gender bit. At the beginning of this stream, I started off by saying that we tend to equate science with categorization. That if we can give something a label, if we can say, well, it works because of X, or it's the same thing as such and such as Y, that it's science. And it's not, by the way. I mean, I already said that. But the point is that we always want a summary. And where I was going to go with this little recorder thing, here we go. This little recorder thing is so it can record everything, can record all kinds of things that I say, and then it uploads it, and then it wants to make an AI summary. And sometimes I have like a 10-second note, and it makes like a page worth of AI summary. Does AI always do a good job of summarizing things? No, not at all. We're starting to look to AI to go, well, I want it to summarize everything. I want to put everything that Tolstoy ever wrote. I'm going to put Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, and another Russian person. Forgive me, everybody in Russia. I'm going to put all those into a GPT and then I'm going to have it summarize it. And it's like, but that's not the same as experiencing. Period. You have to experience these things. AI does not summarize things well. Sometimes it can, sometimes it can. But here's the point. Politicians thrive on the same things. Politicians want summaries that come out of context. They want to use sound bites, not as knowledge, but as wisdom. Oh, actually here, so Miss Chief says Ivan Koloff. Oh, dang, who was the guy who wrote Lolita? It's not coming to my mind. Stick that guy in there too, though. Stick that in there with Dostoevsky, right? Boy, that would be something. Frybird says she didn't know I had a big Russian fan base. I don't know if I ever have. Who knows? Anyway, goodbye, CM. All right, so politicians do these same things. We want sound bites, and we don't want them to be knowledge. Like somebody drops a sound bite that says it's all XXXY. Sound bite. That's not knowledge, that's wisdom. We're pretending it's wisdom. It's untrue. It's absolutely untrue. But here's the thing, Nabokov. Thank you very much, Marchie. There is no shortcut to learning about who we are, and there's no shortcut to learning about what's going on around us. There's no easy way to categorize a person because everybody has so much depth to them. And the question, ultimately, each of us has all this depth. The question is, have we ever plumbed these depths? I think that's all. Wait, Ivan Koloff was a wrestler? You just doing that to make me look bad? It's fine. So if we were to go back, so I did labels. So I said now to go back to labels. In the end, labels never serve us. They can't. We serve them. This is an instance, and Miss Chief, maybe you like this. This is an instance, I believe, of where we have language that ends up constricting the people using it. And that does us no good. When we create language, when we create the concepts that form language, we should not be restrained by them and constrained by them. The comments at the very beginning. So when I talked about this one guy who left me comments on my Caster Semenya live stream, he wanted a label, man or woman. Why? Why? What was the motivation there? What was the motivation? Why did this guy want this label? If I were to make a guess, and probably my guess is not going to be far off, but if I were to guess, I would guess that he wanted to be able to disqualify Semenya from competition with people he would label women. Maybe he wanted to keep Semenya out of locker rooms with other people that he would qualify as women, or bathrooms, or whatever. This is my guess, just a guess, because every label has a motivation. And so, as I'm wrapping this bit up here, I still haven't got to the third gender bit, but as we think about the labels that we use on ourselves, or think about the labels we use, like what labels do you use? Do you personally use on yourself? When I meet somebody, I say, I am, well, sometimes it takes a little longer than just right when I meet somebody, but I will say, I am a pansexual transgender woman. And I'm sure I mean something different with every single one of those 3 words than every single one of you out there does. I mean something different, but I carry those labels proudly. I carry them proudly. Others carry them as a badge of shame. And it's interesting too, because I don't even like the word transgender. Transgender necessarily ties together sex and gender. And I think I spent, long enough saying that the two are separate. So I am a pants. So these are labels I gave myself. If you're going to give yourselves labels, here's my point. Carry those labels proudly. Carry them proudly. Don't take on labels that are badges of shame for you. And now, if we were going to go vice versa here, what labels do we end up using on others? I've done this, I think, just yesterday. If you looked at my transgender joy video from yesterday, I'm doing a little bit of a stupid conservatives. Is that any different from what they're doing to me? I'm giving them an ugly label, and I think they're trying to give me an ugly label. I need to think about that. I need to think about why I would do that. I want to think about, do these labels serve me then? I don't think they do. And just to finish up this particular bit, we have to ask ourselves, why do we use these labels? I'm using these labels because I do want to categorize these people. I do want to say, these are people who will never agree with me. But you know what? The guy stopped responding, after we had a couple of back and there's messages exchanged. And I don't know if he stopped responding to me because he went, that's fair. That's a fair point. And just didn't bother to write it down. Because maybe he did. Who knows? But maybe he didn't. So I want to use these labels because I do want to categorize some people. But categorization is different from science. That is always politics. And anytime you try to categorize something or someone, there's somebody who's going to benefit from that categorization. So that's where I was going to leave you with all on that. There was still the bit that I wanted to talk about. The bit. What was the bit? Oh yeah, here we go. Sorry. The third. So Joe called it third sex, especially in Asian culture. Third gender, because typically it's third gender that we're looking at here. They usually usually think of it as third gender, and I guess the main reason that I would say this is because some of these terms go back millennia. I don't know for a fact with Two-Spirit. Like I don't have an idea on where that goes back, how far that goes back. But Kathoey culture in Thailand as a third gender, the first written account of it was in like the 1200s, late 1200s. I mean, it's 800 years ago, almost a millennium ago. The point here is that we weren't caring about sex and gender 800 years ago. We're caring about it now only because these are labels. And we want to pretend that a label means that we've done some sort of thought. We've done some sort of analysis. And we haven't necessarily. I don't think we have necessarily. There's a couple of good points here that I do want to that I want to follow up on too. So Angela says, our language is only as good as our vocabulary and ability to understand what it means. The unfortunate thing is exactly what Thistle just says right afterwards. So for most, our language is useless. Yeah. Because vocabulary, we need to understand the meanings of words. We need to, but that's also a matter of, to a certain extent, social environment. one of the first things I learned when I was an undergraduate was that blue and green are not as different as I thought. That there was a social component to colors. And I thought, what? I don't think that can happen. But it is true. Every person you talk to, and that's why I said, if you're going to wear labels, if you're going to take labels on, wear them proudly, carry them proudly, and be able to explain what it means to you. If you have somebody coming up, because I don't think they'll understand what you mean. So let's see. So Angela says, my label is different to who I talk to, for example, a woman or a transsexual woman. So, agreed. I mean, if I were going to go into, say, like, I've had somebody have me on their podcast. This is probably a good example. Somebody invited me on their podcast, and it was a religious person. And he was actually very respectful. He says, listen, I don't understand what it means to be transgender. Maybe if I don't, maybe that means my audience would want that same. And I spoke in a way that would be different than I'm speaking now. Here, for the most part, I'm willing to be a little bit more edgy. I'm willing, if somebody, were to jump on me, I would be willing to jump back on them. But, there's no need for it. There was no need for that in the podcast because this guy wanted to be educated. And so I did my best to say, here's what happened. Here's how I grew up, and this is what the transgender experience is. And he was very kind about it. So, agreed. We do, need to moderate, how we communicate, but depending upon the audience. I mean, this is one of the. I'm trying to remember. Was it Toastmasters? I don't know. But there's an organization that has to do with public speaking. I don't know if it's Toastmasters. If Jasmine Vine were here, I would ask her. But and like the number one rule is know your audience. Yeah, you always have to know your audience. Live streaming is a special thing because you go, I don't know if anybody's listening or not. So it's a fascinating thing. But yeah, I mean, know your audience. So let's see. Margie says, my language in the Transgender Joy video yesterday is disrespecting disrespect. Yeah, which is better than disrespecting identity. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm not going to say you're wrong. So, Miss Chief brings up a point that says, gender became much more important after the Industrial Revolution. It didn't mean much to most before. Yeah. I mean, I think I've mentioned, and maybe some of you have forgotten though, but there was a person I interviewed. Their name is Dr. Redford John Barrett, very fascinating person, and their doctoral dissertation was about when people started caring about queer. People started caring about people being queer, and John Redfern had come down to the idea that that it happened somewhere in the Victorian era. There's little before, somewhere during that, because as you bring up, the Industrial Revolution obviously meant that a lot of people were suddenly going to move into a city. Now you have a bunch of jobs and everything. Yes, they were building gender right then during the Industrial Revolution. They had like screwdrivers and hammers and stuff building gender. But it was important because they started worrying about hygiene. And this all comes down to a certain extent to like the baths that the Romans left behind, long before the Victorian era period. Let's say period. So anyway, this is what Redfern came up with, the idea that it was really a sense of hygiene, that people were concerned with whether or not somebody was homosexual or straight, which brought gender into it. Because at the time, homosexual implied two people of the same gender together. It was Victorian era. Again, we weren't really looking at DNA or concerned about, 5-alpha reductase type 2 deficiency and stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, it really didn't mean much to anybody. There's an interesting tidbit here too. And once again, I know I've talked about this, but I love this aspect of language because I've looked up the etymology of gender like over and over again because it's fascinating to me. I'm just curious the etymology, and there's a Proto-Indo-European root. So Proto-Indo-European. So there was a. I know we've had some of this conversation, but there's evidence of a culture that spanned from insular Celts like Ireland all the way to like Indian subcontinent of Asia. That's the Proto-Indo-European, or it's the Indo-European culture. And so what fueled that, there are common roots in many of the languages that we've now sort of abstracted and said, well, we think this is Proto-Indo-European cultural language. That one went fun, huh? The point here is that this was something that has its roots in almost all of our languages, and that's why you can see something like a Sanskrit word that is the exact same as like an Irish word, because this is something that went across, a whole ton of land, from India to Ireland. Where was I going with this? Oh, where I was going with this is that the root for gender is also the same as generation, but it ended up sort of becoming part of genetics. But the idea is family. It had to do with a cultural identity, a cultural and a familial identity. And that's what gender was. And so if I am talking about gender, as I have this whole time, as something that is personal to everybody because it entails so much that is individual, as Freiberg says, that tracks. And I know you said that about something else, but run with me on this. Even way, way back, we understood the idea of identity as something that had to do with how you think of yourself. So I don't know if gender and genre are similar. I think genre comes from probably French, first of all, but which means it probably came through the Roman, through Latin. But Latin was heavily, is obviously has a lot of influence through Proto-Indo-European language there. And Genesis, yeah, funky rock group, no doubt. I know, I was trying to think of more things. I was like, let me see, what do I got? I got generation, I've got genetics, and I've got gender. I was hoping I could come up with something else. Genre comes from the library. That's what Freiberg says. All right, so Margie also brings something about a color. I'd love to see this. Teal, the color, is named after Air New Zealand. Wait, is that for real? It was formerly Tasman Empire Airways Limited, or TEAL. Tasman Bay is indeed teal. So teal is to blue and green what orange is to red and yellow. That is fascinating. I didn't know that. One of my favorite colors, that's a beautiful, thank you for saying that, Margie. One of my favorite colors is chartreuse, which comes from the liqueur made by the monastery that was, I believe it's also a city somewhere, or was a city in France, Brittany maybe, but at the time. But anyway, chartreuse, it's the color of the liqueur. So it's like a yellowy green that just comes from that particular liqueur. Freiberg says her favorite color is puce. Why is that? Because puce, when I think of puce, I think of somebody who's, oh, is that true? Oh, the city is different. Okay. So the city, I don't want to try to say it because I'm terrible with French, but gotcha. Oh, Margie brings up Land of Confusion. So Land of Confusion, that's a Genesis song? Because I was actually just thinking of Ball of Confusion. And not even the Four Tops version of it, but like the Love and Rockets version of it. Is that Four Tops? I think so. No, puce is a lovely color. Keep up with your jokes. So, all right. I had nothing else I was going to say. That was a whole big long ton of wait, ball of confusion is what Mom calls me. Same. Yeah, samesies. That was a lot of really good conversation. I'm so glad that, actually, that's what I thought it was going to be pronounced, Margie. Margie brings up how the city is named that makes the liqueur chartreuse. Anyway, this was something. I hope that this ended up being valuable and fun. The idea of identity, right? I mean, every human ends up having it. Every human has to discover what it is inside us and has to develop what it is that's inside us. In my opinion, this is my opinion, and this is something that I believed, my whole life, is that I don't know if I'd say my whole life exactly. Let me just say it, because first of all, who you are only belongs to you. I believe this. I don't know that I ever acted exactly in accordance with it. That's why I said I wanted to qualify that. But who you are can only belong to you, and that's it. Doesn't belong to anybody else. It belongs only to you. And I also believe that our highest moral obligation, our purpose as humans, is to discover that, to develop that, and make it real. Go out and be who you are. Because if you don't go out and be who you are, somebody else is going to do it for you. And you don't want to do that, And what I mean by that is, you're going to have Marjorie Taylor Greene who's going to tell you who you ought to be. And you definitely don't want that because, because she's kind of yucky. That's me giving Marjorie Taylor Greene a label. And Madge, if you're out there, I apologize. I give you a label. You'd probably give me much worse. Can I call you Madge? Do you think she'd go for that? What do you think? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I will certainly say thank you so much to everybody. I'm a little under 2 hours, but when we get to the point of talking about puce and shart, I think it's time to shut it down. So thank you again to everybody. I'm going to say certainly CM Burns and Frybird and Margie and Thistle and Angela. You know who you are, but society means you have to hide it. I love that. Give her the Madge badge. I think let's go with that. And Miss Chief, and who else, man? Joe Neal and Erica, and CM Burns, I already said, only J.A. Vames. Otherwise, I'm going to miss other people. But everybody who is here, thank you so much. You are why I do what I do, and I will give you another little heart. Thank you. Bye. Ooh, I almost clicked the break button. I'm going to do the offline now.